Have you ever been told your work is important, but not valuable? Have you ever sat across from HR while they explained, very gently, that you should be grateful for being underpaid? I have. And the day they called my raise request unrealistic was the day they unknowingly triggered a seven-figure collapse. My name is Emily Carter. For 12 years, I was the invisible spine of Davenport Dynamics in Riverton, Illinois. 34 years old. Single. No kids. The kind of employee executives love. Always available. Always dependable. Always fixing problems no one else even understood. I was the compliance manager. Which, translated into plain English, meant I was the person who kept federal regulators from kicking down our doors. I caught tax misclassifications before audits. I corrected benefits reporting errors before penalties hit. I rewrote contracts sales had butchered. Last year alone, I prevented an ERISA violation that would have cost the company at least $4 million in fines. No one celebrated that. No one even sent a thank you email. Because when compliance works, nothing happens. And apparently, nothing happening isn't revenue generating. The meeting that changed everything happened on a Tuesday in March. Conference Room B, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. Across from me sat Lydia Barrett, our HR director. Perfect posture. Perfect lipstick. Perfectly rehearsed smile. She tapped her Mont Blanc pen against my performance review and said, "Emily, we've reviewed your compensation adjustment request. 12% is unrealistic in the current market." Unrealistic. I had asked for a 12% raise. Not 50. Not stock options. 12%. Because I had accidentally discovered, through a misrouted payroll spreadsheet, that 2 junior marketing managers were earning $15,000 more than I was. They brought in clients. I kept us from lawsuits. Compliance is important, Lydia continued smoothly, but it's a support function. It doesn't directly generate revenue. Support function. I felt heat rising into my face, but my voice stayed steady. In the last 5 years, I said, I've documented $48 million in avoided penalties, settlements, and regulatory exposure. Her smile tightened. That's your job, Emily. That's what we pay you to do. Then pay me fairly for doing it. Silence. She closed the file. The decision is final. If you're unhappy, perhaps you should explore other opportunities. And just like that, 12 years of loyalty was reduced to a suggestion that I leave if I didn't like it. I walked back to my office past the framed awards on the wall. Best workplace. Excellence in employee relations. I almost laughed. 2 weeks later, I received a calendar invite titled, Quick Sync, HR and Ops. 2 p.m. same conference room. This time, Lydia wasn't alone. Brian Mitchell, a 23-year-old HR associate barely out of business school, sat beside her taking notes like this was a case study. Emily, Lydia began, voice heavy with artificial sympathy, Davenport Dynamics is undergoing strategic restructuring. Unfortunately, your role has been identified as redundant. Compliance responsibilities will be absorbed under legal. Redundant. The woman who kept them legally afloat was redundant. She slid a folder across the table. 2 weeks severance. Accrued PTO paid out. Standard non-disparagement clause. 2 weeks. 12 years. Reduced to 14 days of pay. I opened the document calmly. Years of reviewing contracts had trained my brain to scan for landmines. That's when I saw it. Paragraph 4. As Emily Carter maintained exempt status throughout employment, no overtime compensation is owed for hours worked beyond standard schedule. Exempt status. My pulse slowed instead of racing. They had classified me as exempt executive personnel. Except I had never managed direct reports. Never controlled a departmental budget. Never had hiring or firing authority. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, that classification was questionable at best. Fraudulent at worst. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply said, "I'll review this." That night, I pulled out something I'd maintained for over a decade. Personal time logs. Because compliance professionals document everything. Every late night. Every weekend audit. Every emergency 3 a.m. contract rewrite. Conservative estimate? Over 10,000 hours of unpaid overtime. Roughly $400,000 owed. Not including penalties or interest. But here's the part that made it dangerous. I wasn't the only one misclassified. Sales support. IT supervisors with no teams. Financial analysts clocking 70-hour weeks. This wasn't a mistake. It was systemic. They thought I'd sign quietly and leave. Instead, Friday morning at 8:02 a.m., I wrote an email. Calm. Clinical. Controlled. To Lydia Barrett. CC, Illinois Department of Labor, Wage and Hour Division. Subject, Classification Clarification Inquiry. Dear Lydia, thank you for providing the separation documentation. For clarity and record accuracy, I would appreciate confirmation regarding my exempt classification, given the absence of direct reports or budget authority during my tenure. I am copying the Illinois Department of Labor to ensure consistent understanding of classification standards. I have maintained detailed time records if further review is necessary. Best regards, Emily Carter. No threats. No accusations. Just a question. With the right people copied. 26 seconds after I hit send, Lydia opened it. My phone began ringing at 9:14 a.m. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then another. By 10 a.m., 14 missed calls. Emily, please call me immediately. We need to discuss this. This is unnecessary. Unnecessary. By noon, the company's Slack channels went silent. IT was locking archives. HR was pulling personnel files. I received a screenshot from someone still inside. A message from Lydia to the executive team, code red. Emily Carter involved DOL. Assess exposure immediately. Code red. In 12 years, I'd seen that label used twice. Once during an IRS audit. Once during a contract fraud investigation. Now it was for me. By Monday morning, 3 Department of Labor investigators walked into Davenport's lobby. I wasn't there, but my phone buzzed with updates. They've taken over conference room A, they're requesting 7 years of payroll data. Grant looks sick. Grant Ellison, the CFO who had approved every misclassification memo I'd written. Someone attempted to delete archived payroll files that afternoon. The deletion was logged. That single panicked move transformed an administrative review into potential obstruction. And suddenly, my 12% raise felt very small compared to what was coming. That evening, Lydia showed up at my apartment building. I didn't answer the buzzer. She left an envelope with the doorman. Inside was a personal check for $75,000. Handwritten note, personal loan. No strings attached. Please call off the inquiry. I photographed it. Sent it to my attorney. Attempted inducement. They still thought this was negotiation. It wasn't. It was consequence. By Wednesday, the Riverton Business Journal ran the headline, Davenport Dynamics Under Wage Investigation. Anonymous sources cited systemic overtime violations affecting hundreds. The panic inside that glass tower was seismic. But here's what they didn't know. For 3 years, in the quiet hours after extinguishing their legal fires, I had been building something. Software. An AI-driven compliance monitoring system designed to detect exactly the kind of wage misclassification that had just detonated inside Davenport. I called it Sentinel. And suddenly, investors who had once been politely interested were calling daily. Because fear is the most effective marketing strategy in corporate America. As Davenport scrambled to contain a multi-million-dollar exposure, my inbox filled with meeting requests from companies terrified they might be next. Lydia called again that night. Her voice no longer polished. "Emily, what will it take to make this stop?" I looked at my laptop screen, at the dashboard of Sentinel tracking real-time compliance risk for 3 beta clients. "It was never about stopping anything," I said quietly. "It was about being valued." Silence. Then the line disconnected. They had wanted me invisible. They had forgotten something critical. When you remove the person holding the structure steady, gravity does the rest. And this was only the beginning. If you think this is where the story ends, it isn't. Because what happened next didn't just cost Davenport millions. It made me something they never imagined I could become. By Thursday morning, Davenport Dynamics looked less like a corporation and more like a crime scene dressed in business casual. The Department of Labor investigators didn't rush. They didn't threaten. They simply requested documentation with surgical patience. Payroll records. Internal memos. Time logs. Classification justifications. Every spreadsheet executives thought no one would ever examine. And the more they requested, the quieter the building became. I wasn't inside anymore, but my phone was. Former colleagues, people I had protected for years, began sending updates through encrypted messages. They're interviewing managers individually. Legal is in lockdown. Grant hasn't left his office. Around noon, someone sent me a photo taken through the frosted glass of conference room A, 3 investigators seated calmly at the table. Stacks of banker boxes beside them. Across from them, Lydia Barrett looked like someone had drained the color out of her. Panic inside a corporation spreads like smoke. You don't always see the fire immediately, but you feel it choking the air. By Friday, preliminary findings were circulating internally. Misclassification wasn't limited to me. It extended to over 200 employees. Some had been labeled exempt executives with no teams. Others were administrative professionals, performing routine clerical work. Overtime hours quietly absorbed into salaried expectations. The estimated back pay exposure alone exceeded $5 million. That didn't include penalties. Or interest. Or the fact that attempted deletion of payroll archives had now been logged. That mistake was critical. It shifted the tone of the investigation from careless oversight to potential willful violation. And in regulatory language, willful is expensive. The following Monday, I received a call from Victoria Reynolds at Apex Capital in Chicago. We had spoken months earlier about my compliance software. At the time, she had been intrigued but cautious. Now her voice carried urgency. "Emily, I'll be direct. 3 of our portfolio companies have called us this week asking how to prevent becoming the next Davenport. Your system detects classification risk in real time?" "Yes." "And automates audit trails?" "Yes." She paused. "We want in." Fear had done what pitch decks couldn't. Within 48 hours, I was sitting in a downtown conference room presenting Sentinel's capabilities to a room of venture partners who suddenly understood exactly how expensive non-compliance could become. The irony was sharp. The company that had dismissed me as redundant had just created the most compelling case study for my product. Negotiations moved quickly. Faster than I expected. Apex initially offered $10 million for majority control. I declined. Control mattered. Not just financially, but philosophically. I hadn't endured 12 years of being sidelined to surrender authority now. We settled at $12.5 million for 40% equity, with me retaining board control and operational leadership. When I signed the agreement, my hands were steady. Wealth wasn't the victory. Leverage was. Meanwhile, Davenport's situation deteriorated publicly. The Riverton Business Journal updated its coverage. Davenport faces multi-million-dollar wage settlement. Investors began questioning contract stability. 2 major clients placed projects on hold pending investigation results. Insurance carriers reviewed coverage exclusions related to fraud. Inside the company, emergency town halls became weekly rituals. CEO Jonathan Whitfield stood before employees delivering rehearsed assurances about cooperation and transparency. But employees weren't stupid. Rumors of layoffs began circulating. HR, ironically, was overwhelmed fielding questions about unpaid overtime claims. Then came the official number. $7.4 million in back wages and penalties. The announcement triggered something almost cinematic. Grant Ellison, the CFO who had signed off on classification policy year after year, reportedly collapsed during an internal briefing. Paramedics were called. Stress does interesting things when consequences arrive all at once. Lydia, I was told, stopped making eye contact with anyone in the building. She had once told me compliance didn't generate revenue. Now compliance failure was hemorrhaging it. That week, I made one final gesture. I ordered a large arrangement of white lilies from Riverton's most exclusive florist. Elegant. Stark. I attached a simple card. Thank you for undervaluing me. Emily. I had them delivered to the executive floor reception at precisely noon. According to someone still inside, the flowers sat there for days. No one wanted to move them. They weren't an insult. They were a mirror. By the time Sentinel's funding round officially closed, Davenport had entered formal settlement negotiations. Layoffs followed. 40% workforce reduction to stabilize cash flow. Executive resignations quietly announced as strategic transitions. Grant stepped down first. Lydia was reassigned to a vague special projects role that industry veterans recognize as corporate purgatory. Dennis Palmer, head of legal, began updating his resume before the ink on the settlement dried. I received one final call from CEO Jonathan Whitfield. His voice lacked its former polish. Emily, we underestimated you. I didn't respond immediately. Silence can be instructive. Would you consider consulting to help us rebuild compliance properly? He continued. Name your rate. I looked out the window of my new office overlooking the Chicago skyline. $600,000 per quarter. Minimum 1-year contract. Paid up front. He exhaled slowly. That's steep. That's expertise, I replied. He didn't accept. And I didn't expect him to. 6 months later, Sentinel had 70 enterprise clients. Companies that once treated compliance as a cost center now treated it as infrastructure. Investors referred to my story as a cautionary legend. But I rarely told it publicly. Revenge makes headlines. Accountability builds empires. Davenport Dynamics still exists. Barely. A diminished version of itself. The once bright logo atop their building now flickers intermittently. Deferred maintenance is often the first visible sign of deeper instability. Sometimes when I'm back in Riverton visiting family, I see that sign from the highway. I don't feel anger. I feel clarity. Davenport didn't collapse because I attacked it. It collapsed because I stopped protecting it. There's a difference. I didn't light the fire. I simply stepped aside and allowed gravity to function. Undervaluation is a quiet form of erosion. It chips away at confidence. At loyalty. At patience. But it also clarifies something powerful. When you know your worth, you stop negotiating against yourself. I asked for 12%. They said it was unrealistic. In the end, their decision cost them millions. My decision earned me freedom. And here's what I've learned. The most dangerous employee in any organization isn't the loud one. It's the competent one who keeps documentation. The one who understands systems. The one who can distinguish between oversight and exploitation. When that person decides to stop absorbing impact, the structure feels it immediately. If you're listening to this while sitting in your car before work, or taking a break at your desk, wondering whether your contributions are invisible, let me say this clearly. Track your value. Document your impact. And never confuse loyalty with obligation. Companies will call you family until the quarterly report disappoints them. Know your leverage before you need it. Because sometimes the most powerful move you'll ever make isn't shouting. It's sending one calm, well-addressed email. If this story resonated with you, tell me in the comments. Have you ever been undervalued at work? What would you have done in my position? Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs the reminder that their expertise has value. I'm Emily Carter. And sometimes, the quietest voice in the room is the one that changes everything.